The 1970s was a time of transformation in the automotive world, a decade that gave birth to some of the most unforgettable vehicles. Yet, there are plenty of 1970s cars that time has nearly erased from memory. Let's take a trip back to the cars that deserve more recognition. 1. 1970. AMC Hornet. AMC's Hornet might be one of the most underrated cars from the 1970s. While most are familiar with the Pacer and Gremlin, the Hornet deserves its place in history. Compact, efficient, and versatile, the Hornet was ahead of its time, offering practicality and style when America was beginning to turn away from gas-guzzling giants. From the Hornet, we saw the birth of the AMC Eagle, an early precursor to today's crossovers. 2. 1970. Ford Maverick. Ford's Maverick didn't get nearly the love it deserved. This humble yet reliable sedan with a cool fastback design was a standout in its own right. The Maverick was the perfect example of an affordable car with a touch of style, embodying the 70s spirit without the price tag of a luxury model. Yet, it faded into obscurity, much to the disappointment of car enthusiasts. 3. 1972. Ford Torino. The Ford Torino, especially its Gran Torino variant, has become a classic muscle car, partly thanks to its appearance in the iconic TV show Starsky and Hutch. But the Torino deserves more than just a mention for its role in pop culture. As a muscle car, a family sedan, and even a wood panel wagon, the Torino encapsulated the versatility of 1970s American design. It was a perfect mix of sporty style and family car practicality. 4. 1971 Volkswagen 411/412. Volkswagen's 411 and 412 models were their attempt at luxury, but it fell short. While the 411 had some modern touches, including the Super Beetle's strut front suspension, it failed to meet the American luxury car standards. A lackluster 80-horsepower engine couldn't keep up with its competitors, and by 1974, Volkswagen pulled the plug on the model. Despite this, it still holds a quirky place in automotive history. 5. 1973 Pontiac Astre. Chevrolet's Vega was infamous for its failings, but few remember that Pontiac had its own version, the Astra. The Astra, though slightly better than the Vega, still suffered from the same issues. It was too expensive and too similar to its Chevy sibling. Despite GM's attempt at making a better small car, the Astra was largely forgotten, overshadowed by other more successful models. 6. 1973 Oldsmobile Omega. The Omega was Oldsmobile's take on the Chevrolet Nova. Despite being a solid, reliable car, it was often overshadowed by its more famous counterparts. While not a standout in the world of performance, the Omega was an important part of GM's lineup in the 1970s, offering a slightly more upscale alternative to the Nova. 7. 1975 Ford Granada. The Ford Granada was a car of contradictions. It tried to marry European styling with American sensibilities, but it always seemed uncomfortable in its own skin. Ford compared the Granada to the Mercedes-Benz 280. But while it wasn't quite a luxury car, it had its moments of success. Despite selling nearly 1.8 million units, the Granada has largely been forgotten today. 8. 1977 Datsun 200SX. While Datsun, now Nissan, became synonymous with affordable cars, the 200SX wasn't one of its finest moments. Attempting to capture the sporty coupe market, the 200SX fell flat, offering poor performance and questionable styling. It was slow, clumsy, and soon forgotten. However, the 200SX's failure pushed Datsun to build better sports cars in the coming years, ultimately leading to the success of their later models. 9. 1975 Mercury Bobcat. The Mercury Bobcat was essentially a fancier version of the Ford Pinto, but with one glaring difference: the Bobcat's styling failed to impress. Though Mercury tried to make it look more upscale with changes to the front end and taillights, it didn't fool anyone. Despite its lack of success, Ford sold 1.3 million Pintos, while the Bobcat barely managed 225,000 units. 10. 1978 Buick Century. The Buick Century, like many American cars of the era, was caught in the throes of the Euro obsession. Buick thought the sleek hatchback design would appeal to a new generation, but the car didn't sell as well as expected. It took GM 2 years to release a proper sedan, and by then, the hatchback concept was already on its way out. 11. 1978 Ford Fairmont. The Fairmont was Ford's attempt to introduce a simpler, more functional car for the 1970s market. It was the antithesis of the flashy, oversized cars of the time. The Fairmont was a straightforward sedan, simple, efficient, and somewhat charming in its minimalist approach. Although it hasn't had the same lasting appeal as some other cars from the era, it was ahead of its time in its simplicity. 12. 1978 Dodge Magnum. The Dodge Magnum of 1978 was Chrysler's attempt to create a personal luxury car, competing with the likes of the Ford Thunderbird. Though it had some cool features, including the iconic flip-up headlights, it was based on outdated technology and never gained much traction. Despite the Magnum's lack of success, it still stands as an interesting footnote in Chrysler's history. These forgotten gems from the 1970s each had something special, even if they didn't make it into the history books in the way they deserved. Whether they were ahead of their time or simply victims of bad timing, these cars still hold a place in automotive nostalgia. Do any of these forgotten models bring back memories for you? Let us know in the comments.